Hello and welcome to the webinar series PPPs in South Asia and the first webinar in the series PPPs in Bangladesh, Institutions and Financing, jointly sponsored by the World Bank Group E-Institute and the Public-Private Partnerships Cross-Cutting Solutions area. We have 4 other upcoming webinars in this series featuring stories and discussions from India, Pakistan and Bhutan, which will follow this first webinar on Bangladesh. As most of you who have been in this field for some time know, South Asia saw a rapid rise in PPP investment volumes, starting with the Indian National Highway Program, with a gradual spread of the PPP mode to other sectors, initially the transport sectors, and more recently a whole range of non-transport and social sectors. We have also seen a proliferation of PPPs at the subnational levels in India, among other countries in the region, Pakistan, and today we'll hear Bangladesh, and more recently Bhutan have been working to create policy frameworks and systematic project pipelines across sectors. Through discussions with senior policymakers from the region, this webinar series will not only bring to you very rare insights on PPPs, you will also have the opportunity to question policymakers on issues that are of concern to you. Coming back to our webinar for today, we have with us, joining from Dhaka, a senior policymaker and practitioner at the very center of PPPs in the country, Syed H. Uddin, the Chief Executive Officer of the Public-Private Partnerships Office in Bangladesh. Syed has had the unique opportunity to work in 2 very different contexts in public-private partnerships. He was a fast-track entrant to the British Civil Service and worked as a senior policy advisor to the United Kingdom government on PFI and PPPs before joining the PwC in UK. Since 2012, he has been overseeing and driving the program in Bangladesh, which is a very different country from the United Kingdom. Given the unique perspective gained from working in 2 very different environments, it would be very interesting to hear from him as he talks about the evolution of public-private partnership institutions in Bangladesh and the financing of PPPs. To what extent the conventional wisdom of the PFI program in the UK applies to PPPs in Bangladesh. Let us hear from him. At the end of Syed's presentation, which will be for around 30 minutes, we will have a question-answer session of about 20 to 25 minutes, so keep your questions ready. There is a power disruption right now in Dhaka, where Syed is sitting, so there is a chance that we will lose the video momentarily in case the power comes back on. But he will surely be back again in a few seconds, so don't go away and stay with us through the end of the presentation. Syed, a very warm welcome to you. And over to you for your presentation on PPPs in Bangladesh, institutions and financing.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, good morning and good evening to everyone. And many thanks to Shamala for inviting me to talk on this occasion. As Shamala mentioned, I have been in Dhaka in Bangladesh since 2012 as the CEO of the PPP office under the Prime Minister's office, and I've been working in order to develop the public-private partnership program in Dhaka. Having worked in the UK before, obviously I have had a lot of familiarity with PFIs and the concepts, but obviously the context in a developing country is quite different, and there's many areas where we are innovating, we are looking at new practices, we are looking at other countries, what they're doing, and trying to bring in best practices in the local context of Bangladesh. In this session of about 25 minutes, I will take you through a journey in terms of 6 points. The first thing I want to give you a background in terms of the vision. Why was the PPP program in Bangladesh launched? I want to then take you through my view of the development of PPP in Bangladesh through the different stages and the different periods. I'll then focus on the revised PPP program and actually the key changes that was implemented and the key institutions that was formed. I want to bring all of it together by talking to you about what has been achieved in the 3 years since the we have been working on the program. Before going to some of the critical success factors, I believe that can be looked at and supported by different development partners, and then coming on to some conclusions. So what I would like to start off with is talking about Bangladesh. I mean, it's had a bit of an unheralded sort of a success story in terms of over the last 10 years, average growth has been over 6%. Year in, year out. So it's quite a steady, consistent growth, and this is despite the GFC crisis, global financial crisis, credit crunch that happened a number of years ago. At that time I was in the UK, and a lot of people in Bangladesh were concerned that the GFC may mean lower exports of garments, and therefore it would have an impact in terms of the GDP growth. But as has been seen, actually there has been little, if no impact at all in terms of the overall impact. So strong growth over the last 10 years, over 6%. And the main question was in terms of how does Bangladesh actually launch from this growth and actually get to a higher trajectory of growth. This is where government had put in place a sixth five-year plan. The sixth five-year plan sets the objectives of Bangladesh to become a middle-income country by the year 2021. The key focus of this plan was in terms of how do we increase from the current 6% growth that we have been looking at to developing it 8% onwards to a 10% growth progressively over the complete plan period. One of the key issues that was highlighted was the need to improve infrastructure, because in Bangladesh the whole growth has been led by the private sector. It has been led by the garments industries, RMG, the leather industry, and so on. And the whole idea was how do we actually enable the private sector to get a better facilities and infrastructure in order to allow them to grow much faster. So that was a key target, is looking at enhancing the growth through infrastructure development. This slide is covering the six five-year plan's infrastructure target. What it was looking at was increasing the infrastructure investment from 2% of GDP to 6% of GDP, which is quite a large jump. It was not looking at bringing in that investment solely through public investment. Actually, the plan forecast was to reduce the amount of public investment in infrastructure from 2% to just around 1%. But at the same time to have a incremental increase in investment from the private sector. So the whole focus of the sixth five-year plan was to look at bringing in further private investment into infrastructure in order to deliver the services, the public services that are required for the growth to happen. So we're looking at over 75% of investment to come from the private sector, and this is where the PPP element came in. So what the sixth five-year plan emphasized was this, and I just quote, "The government recognizes that strong public-private partnerships can play a catalytic role in mobilizing additional resources as well as creating additional capacity and help for implementing public programs. And therefore the emphasis has been put on PPP." So that's where the background of PPP was. It was mainly a way of unlocking investment into the infrastructure. What I found unique here was a lot of developing countries look at PPP as a investment tool, but in the context of Bangladesh it was not simply investment tool, but it actually also looked at the use of PPP for essential social and economic infrastructure will enhance the quality of services as well as the investment side. So it was recognized about the value for money that PPP brings. It was recognized that PPP will enhance the quality of these services in addition to elevating the strain. So there was quite strong recognition from the policymakers and planners that PPP would not only bring in additional investment, but also help in enhancing the value for money and the quality of these services. So with this context, I would like to go a bit into the history of what we call public partnerships with the private sector in Bangladesh. Like many countries, it's not that PPP happened overnight. There has been a history of public sector working with the private sector. So in the next slide, I'm just going to give you my analysis in terms of how I've seen Bangladesh's government's participation with private sector evolve since its liberation in the early 70s. So the first phase I have noted was all the way from the 70s, 80s up to the mid-90s. The partnership that happened in Bangladesh with government and the private sector was mainly on a project-based initiative. There was no programs, there was no generic policies, and there was no laws or anything else of that sort of nature. But it was simply on an individual basis. Projects were coming along with the ministries, and they're looking at developing it. A few examples here is, for example, there was a joint venture agreement done between government and private sector for a fertilizer company called Cafco. The other example are in the health sector, where there was a number of initiatives where government was investing upfront cash funds to create health hospitals and so on, but where the operation and running was left to the private sector to be done on a sort of a break-even or a profit basis. And this was up to 1995, where this project-based initiative was seen. The next phase is 96 to 2004, where I have noted that there was a sector-focused initiative that came out, and this was mainly in the power sector. In 1996, Bangladesh enacted the private sector power generation policy, and the Asian Development Bank and the World Bank were key supporters in developing this concept. And as a result of this policy, and this was to address the severe power crisis that Bangladesh had at that time, a couple of projects came out at that time, and they're quite sort of large and even now notable projects. One was a 360 megawatt power project in Haripur, and the other is a 450 megawatt power project in called Meghnaghat. Very successful projects, contract awarded I think late 90s, early 2000s. But I think these projects also won the Asian Deal of the Year awards, and very successfully done, and still currently operating at a very good pricing in terms of that. So that was a power sector where we had the first sector-based initiative come out. Then in 2005 to 2010, we had what I would say is a program-based initiative. So having seen the success in the power sector, government decided to extend the use of private sector investment beyond power into other areas, and this is where government issued what's called the private sector infrastructure guidelines. This was in 2004, and as part of this, a number of projects were taking up. The power projects continued, for example, Dhaka PPS1. A number of port projects were taking off. For example, land ports in Teknaf was taken on board, which is still currently operating under a what we call build, own, operate transfer model. And then one road project was done in that time, or was awarded in that time, called the Honey Flyover, which actually came into operation only a couple of years ago. So that was in 2005, 2010, where it was a program-based initiative. So as you can see, that experience of working with the private sector was there much earlier in Bangladesh, especially in the power sector, where a lot of success was done. But what was seen lacking was the actual what we call drive and momentum in other sectors had not continued. So despite the 2004 private sector infrastructure guidelines coming out, actually the momentum and the spread of PPP projects in infrastructure wasn't there. So based on this, government looked at how can they enhance and improve the amount of projects that are happening in this sector. And this is where the current program is going on, and I have termed this as a centrally integrated, it's a program, centrally integrated program initiative, and this is under the 2010 Strategy and Policy for PPP, which is what we're operating under. I will talk in the next few slides the key changes that came under this program, but the main thing is that we are now looking at a multi-sectoral approach in terms of projects, and we are looking at quite a widening in terms of number of sectors that they are there. In addition, we also have this 2010 Special Powers Act, which also supports projects in the power sector to continue. So we have a PPP policy for all infrastructure and a specific policy for the power to allow accelerated power to be developed. We are also working on, at the moment, on a draft PPP law. I've been working on it for the last few years. It has gone through a number of stages of consultation and iterations. It has now received the final approval of the Cabinet, the Honourable Prime Minister, the Finance Minister, and our President as well. It's currently in Parliament, and now I am discussing with the Standing Committee of Parliament to take them through the law for enactment, hopefully in the next few months. So the new framework. The 5 key areas that the new framework covered: institutional changes were there, regulatory changes were put in place, project preparation was emphasized upon, capacity development, a lot of focus there, and finally financial support. These are the 5 key blocks that was based in the new PPP policy for development. And if I was to say what the key changes was, firstly in terms of institutional changes, the key what we call new development was having a centralized regulatory unit and a program champion. In terms of regulatory changes, the key change was about having a streamlined approval and integrated policy framework. On the project preparation, huge amount of emphasis was done on proper planning and structured development of projects using support of advisors and experts. Capacity development, a large number of training sessions and stakeholder consultations and so on have been put in place. And finally, financial support to help with both the financing of transactions and also the funding of transactions. So these are the 5 aspects we're looking at. I'm just going to touch on a few of these in more detail, mainly the institutions. So in terms of institutions, we were looking to cover a number of areas. So firstly, obviously, it's the looking at who is actually going to be the project developer and implementer. So PPP project development and implementation was one aspect. Who's actually going to give that advisory support in terms of these projects? Next thing was looking at the financing, making sure there's adequate financing there. Then making sure that there is the funding availability and having a recognition of contingent liabilities that will be arising in the future, and how do we look at that. Overall approvals of the projects and the policies. Overall the policy direction to be given in the market. And finally, something in the middle to bring all of this together, to regulate and facilitate. So these were the 6 plus 1, 7 components that we are looking to address in terms of the institutions in Bangladesh. So some are existing institutions and some are new. So I'll just take you through each of them. So first, into the PPP project development and implementation, we were looking at the line ministries and agencies, obviously. So all projects in Bangladesh are the responsibility of the line ministry and agencies, and they remain responsible for developing and implementing their projects. The regulatory and facility role was given to the PPP office sitting in the Prime Minister's office in order to pull the whole thing together. In terms of project approvals and policy, the responsibility is now with the Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs. This is headed by the Honourable Prime Minister, Honourable Finance Minister, and the CCEA, the Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs, is overall responsible for the PPP projects approvals and the policy approvals. In addition, to look at contingent liabilities, financing and funding, a separate unit was created in the Ministry of Finance called the PPP unit. To give the overall guidance on the PPP and the market, an advisory council is in place, which is headed by Honourable Prime Minister, and it has representations from both the public sector and the private sector. For PPP financing, a new entity was created called BIFFL, that stands for Bangladesh Infrastructure Financing Facility Limited. This is a state-owned enterprise under the Ministry of Finance, and their role is to provide debt financing and equity investments in PPP projects. In addition, previously we have another state-owned enterprise also under the Ministry of Finance called IDCO. It's Infrastructure Development Company Limited, and their role is also to supplement and provide PPP financing. So we've got 2 institutions, one BIFFL and one IDCO, both to support the financing of PPP projects. And finally, we have an entity called IIFC, who have been around also since the mid-90s, and they are there to provide expert project facilitation to the different line ministries on the feasibility studies and the project documents and structuring projects. So this is overall all the institutions in Bangladesh who actually are looking at the development of the PPP framework. So to summarize, the projects are owned, developed and implemented by the line ministry over there. We work closely with the PPP office in order to guide them, facilitate them, regulate them in terms of the work. In terms of getting advisory support, we can use the support of IFC or any other market private sector advisors. So any of the advisors can come in and support us. For financing, we have BIFFL and IDCO, in addition to the domestic and international market financing availability. To look after contingent liability and the financing for these transactions, we have this unit, the PPP unit in the Ministry of Finance, who we work very closely with. And overall approval is sitting with the Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs. PPP Office, our role is quite vast. And just a point here, in terms of the PPP Office and its role, many different markets, many different countries have different roles given to the PPP Office. Even when I was in the UK working in Treasury over the last 15-20 years, even in the Treasury, the whole PPP mechanism and the oversight role has changed a number of times. First of all, it used to sit inside Treasury, then it went outside Treasury as part of Partnerships UK, and then the role has come back within Treasury as well. So I see the PPP Office's role as being something of a development that will be on an iterative basis. Currently in Bangladesh, we in the PPP Office role are actually centralizing and carrying on a large amount of the different functions over here. So for example, we are doing all the screening and approving of projects. Policy development and enforcement is also part of us. We appoint transaction advisors and then assign them to the different ministries in order to support them to carry it out. We currently have a panel of advisors composing of quite a large number of firms from worldwide, including PwC, KPMG, EY, Deloitte, Sri, Group, and so on and so forth. It's quite a large panel that we have in place already. We also currently are taking a lot of detailed interest and support in terms of expert project facilitation, mainly because we are currently standardizing our documentation, so we directly get involved in the structuring of documents with the line ministries. Promotion and marketing is a strong part of what we do. Stakeholder engagement, very important in Bangladesh, so we carry that role out. We also lead a lot of the discussions with our partners and donor agencies, including the World Bank, JICA, ADB, and so on, in terms of the PPP arena. We have quite a lot of structured capacity building programs that we are running at the moment here. And finally, the whole monitoring and reporting mechanism is also part of our role. So quite an extensive role that is being carried out at the moment. The second block was about the changes in our approvals and so on. We currently follow quite a structured approach to development of PPP in Bangladesh. It goes through this cycle of 6 elements. The first one is screening, where we are only looking to pick projects which are preliminary, we believe, through feasibility is suitable for PPP, and the PPP office gets involved in screening those projects. Once it has been screened, the project goes through an approval process from the Cabinet Committee for Economic Affairs at that phase. Once approval has been received, then we will look at appointing advisors and consultants in order to carry out the pre-development and the technical studies, environmental studies and so on for the feasibility. Once this has been completed, we will look at developing the commercial terms and heads of terms of the documents with the use of the advisors. Before we prepare all the documentations and supporting documents as well in order to go to bid. Once the bidding has been completed, we will look at working together with the winning bidder in order to look at the financing. So we will look at our government institutions to provide support, and also look at opening up the private market there as well. This goes on to the monitoring and implementation phase, where we will be looking at supporting the ministry and agency to make sure all the CPs are satisfied, and then to take the learnings from these projects onto the next project that we'll be carrying out. So that's the current process that we are taking forward in terms of development of PPPs. A few slides in terms of the few other items. Awareness and capacity building. So just to summarize, we do carry a lot of these out. In the last, between 2012 and 2014, we've done over 60 events covering over 3,500 people. in terms of different locations, and we structure these at different levels. We either have a tailored training program, which are more in depth and more long-term basis, but takes sort of actual project directors and the actual participants through a structured mechanism of training. Policy level consultations happen amongst the senior government and senior leading private sector business people and chambers. The awareness seminars are broader, meant to create awareness amongst the private sector about the potential investment opportunities. And the general capacity building events is aimed at the government officials at a more wider level. In terms of financial support, which is the fifth of our key components, so we've put it in place. The PPP policy established three specific financing and funding support measures. The first one is for technical assistance. It's technical assistance financing. Then it's for viable to gap financing, and then Bangladesh Infrastructure Financing Fund. The objective of the technical assistance financing is to support the PPP project development. So this is talking about the transaction advisors being appointed and the marketing work to be done and the different documentation and so on. The total amount of fund placed by government is approximately $12 million, about 100 crore taka, and the PPP office has these funds, and these are being used to support the development of the actual project development work and so on. The next block of money is viability gap financing. This is something that is in place in India, where essentially it's looking to enhance the commercial and financial viability of PPP projects in order to make them more bankable. The total amount of funds put in place there is 400 crore taka, and this fund has been placed with the PPP unit which sits in the Ministry of Finance. So any project which is socio-economically highly desirable, but for lack of commercial viability may not be able to be done on a PPP basis, the VGF fund is designed for that in order to enhance its ability to be banked. And finally, the BIFFL, Bangladesh Infrastructure Financing Fund Limited, they are there to provide longer-term financing, whether debt or equity, and the total amount of seed money placed in them is 2,500 crore taka, which is about $315 million in total. This is seed money. The whole idea of BIFFL is to use the seed money and to attract further investment in order to grow the amount of funds to be placed into PPP projects. So this slide, I'm now bringing together what the impact of the changes has been over the last 2-3 years. So we worked on implementing this program over the last 2-3 years, and I've just set out what impact it had on the actual pipeline. So when I joined this office in 2012, at that moment I inherited a pipeline of projects of two. There was the Dhaka Elevated Expressway and there was the Kaliko High-Tech Park. These were two projects. This is excluding our power projects. These were the two non-power projects, PPP projects, that we were actively looking at. Since that time, if you look at the different stages, so I've just set it in 3 blocks. We have an in-principle approval stage where a project is preliminarily approved by Cabinet to be developed. Then we have the advisor engagement stage, the time it takes us to appoint advisors to support projects, and then the investor selection stage where we are in the process of starting the procurement phase of the project. In terms of the initial selection and approval by Cabinet for taking projects forward, the numbers have shot up quite exponentially. In the initial year, in the first 6 months, we actually went from 2 projects to 7 projects. It jumped to 17 projects the following year, that's 12-13, and then to 39 projects in 13-14. As of October last year, we were at 42 projects in terms of in-principle approval. Engagement with advisors in Bangladesh takes some time. It can take between 6 months to over a year to actually hire advisors in Bangladesh at the moment. That's why I put it down as actually quite a large key milestone driver in terms of progress. This development has been, it's gone from 3 advisors being either engaged or sort of in the process of being engaged, gradually moving to 14 to 33, and currently about 34 advisors who are in the process of being engaged or have already been engaged. The final box is in terms of investor selection. 2 projects have actually gone up to bidding in 2011-12. This had jumped to 6, and currently we are at 12 projects which are currently in the bidding phase or the registration of interest phase in terms of that. So quite a significant jump in terms of projects that's coming through the pipeline for PPP. In terms of sectors and size, the total of 42 projects that we have at the moment are mainly large projects, over $13 billion value of the pipeline, and then a handful of medium and small projects. Most of the projects that you'll see is in the transport sector, and this is followed by the health sector and the zone sector. Zone is basically the economic zones and the high-tech parks that we are looking to develop. And then there's a handful in the civil accommodation sector. So this gives you an overview of the snapshot in terms of projects. So I'm just looking at the time, and I probably have only a couple of minutes to go, so I'll just rush through the next slide. And on this one, I have just thought to highlight some of the sort of critical success factors I believe are important for the PPP program to be successful. And I've highlighted these mainly because I believe that there's a role for our development partners and our bilateral partners in this phase. Having worked here for 3 years, there's a large number of areas I can look at, and I can see the challenges that many countries, developing countries, have in bringing across PPPs. But the 6 areas I wanted to highlight at this stage are the ones I put in there. The first thing is the critical importance of high-level political support. To get things done, it's very important that there is support from across levels from our senior ministers in terms of the concept of PPPs and the drive to get these things done. The next one is it doesn't happen overnight. It's very difficult to develop a successful PPP program overnight. I'm not aware of any country that's been able to do it. So there needs to be a long-term commitment to PPP and the patience to actually take it forward and to undertake it. Skilled resources are very important, and this is where I think one of the areas that I particularly have noted that we are in desperate need of. And the issue is, it's not skilled resources, it's actually skilled resources who actually have the understanding of the local market. So it's being able to blend international skilled resources with a good understanding of the local markets, because what happens in other countries may not fully apply in Bangladesh. So the advice has to be tailored to be able to understand what works in the country and what works somewhere else, and actually to bring it together. And that itself is actually quite a struggle. Next thing is about having the funds available for the development and capacity and the reward. PPP projects and those who are working here will definitely be working much, need to be much more committed to developing these work. So we need to find out a way of looking at how we can support them, to provide them with the resources and the rewards to allow them to take that forward. Many developing countries, Bangladesh included, has challenges in terms of the domestic financing scenario. I've already mentioned a pipeline of 42 projects. This excludes the many other projects we have in our power sector. So the total funding requirement is in the billions. The domestic market currently, capacity-wise, is going to be challenged in order to meet them. So we need to look at how we further look at enhancing our domestic market and bringing the international market in place as well. And finally, the investment climate. The investment climate is obviously key. It has a bearing in terms of the ability to attract investors into the market, and it goes much wider than simply the infrastructure part. It's talking about the red tape, the processes, the time it takes to actually go through the process and get your companies registered and so on. So there's quite a extensive requirement that the investment climate is enhanced. And I believe these are all areas where the multilateral and donor agencies can play a strong role. And in Bangladesh, actually, we do have a lot of support from, for example, the World Bank and IFC group in terms of our investment climate. The PPP office itself is supported by World Bank's IPFF program, so we have support from those areas. The Asian Development Bank a few years ago was supporting us initially with some of the documentation. So we've had support, and I think that this sort of support is actually critical in order to ensure the success of the projects. So just to conclude, a few closing messages. First thing is, with virtually large parts of the world, if not most of the world, looking at employing and using a PPP framework, I believe PPP has a role to play in all countries, including Bangladesh. In Bangladesh, it is viewed as another arsenal, another armory in the hands of our Ministry of Finance to look at supporting the development of infrastructure through the use of private sector participation and public sector participation, as well as government-to-government initiatives, as well as working with the different donor agencies for those as well. There has been a direct impact seen from the development of the PPP office and the catalytic impact it had in terms of enhancing and developing the pipeline of projects. Capacity building remains at the heart and core of success of these projects. There are many projects I have done where I have been through a number of different secretaries, a number of different project directors, a number of different teams, and at all times these projects, to make sure they continue to go, had a requirement on our part to go and explain to the new person who was there in charge about these projects and the basis on which we're doing and the value that's being added to these things. The fourth point is, I cannot underscore how important this is. There needs to be a long-term vision. PPP, you will not see an overnight success. It will take time. It does take time because in most countries, PPP is not starting as a greenfield. It is starting as a brownfield environment, and the need for PPP to find its place in this brownfield environment where all these other cross-cutting policies, rules and regulations exist. So PPP needs to get in there and actually go in and be able to deal with and address these various conflicting laws, policies, rules and regulations that may exist. That takes time. It takes time to bring in and develop the capacity of people. So long-term vision, critical. And finally, I think on an optimistic note, I believe Bangladesh is quite well placed now in terms of meeting the development of PPPs in Bangladesh. We have spent a large part of our initial 3 years in terms of putting the institutions in place, and last year and a half we've been working on developing this initial pipeline of projects. Going forward, we'll be looking at bringing together the standardization policies in order to framework a large program going forward. So many thanks. I hand back to Shimala and any questions to take. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Syed, for a very interesting presentation. And Bangladesh appears to be doing quite a lot in terms of financing support to projects as well as building the capacity within government. We have a number of interesting questions today, questions which came in with the registration and also questions in the chat box right now. To the extent possible, given that we have around 20 minutes, I'll try to club these questions together. I'll start with a question from Joel Kolkar, who's from the World Bank, and he wants to know who have the investors been, local or international, and among debt investors, have you had more from the banks or the insurance funds, and what do the tenures look like? And we have a similar question from Sudeshna Ray. What are the sources of private funding? Maybe you could answer these, and I'll also talk about the next question so that you're prepared. Sally from the World Bank asks, how do you assess the success of projects? What measures do you have for contract management? So would you start with the first question on financing?
Yeah. So first in terms of investment, so what's interesting is most of our investors is typically coming from Asian countries. So the local investors are getting more and more interested in coming through. Power sector, we tend to have a lot of local investors. So most of the power projects currently is being done by local companies. In terms of the new sectors like roads, we're getting a huge amount of interest from Asia. So we are about to launch a project called the Dhaka Bypass project, which we're going to tender in about a month. We've been marketing this for about a year now. And in that project, we did a registration of interest, a market sounding exercise, where 20 companies came, and 7 were from 7 different countries outside Bangladesh. In terms of countries, we're looking at China, Malaysia, India, India, Korea, Vietnam, and Thailand as sort of main people who've come on those markets. In addition to that, I've had investors coming inquiring from Turkey for opportunities, and recently Spanish companies have also been inquiring. So mostly Asian, but gradually now opening up to sort of European countries. In terms of tenors of loans and so on, we're getting a lot of sovereign wealth funds and private equity firms coming in, hedge funds coming through. So Goldman Sachs have been here, Merrill Lynch and so on have been here as well. So they do have a lot of funds stored up for private equity. So a lot of these companies are coming. I'm also getting a lot of inquiries from the Middle East. A lot of the funds in the Middle East are coming in terms of the equity investment side of things. But in terms of debt financing, it's mainly local or any of the international banks we have available locally, like HSBC and Standard Chartered and so on. I think there was a question about what do you call success of projects and how do we actually look at the success of projects. So in terms of projects, most of our projects actually are in the stage of being developed or are about to be awarded. So at the moment, in terms of contract management, this is an area that we are mainly looking at the concession agreement and the terms and conditions being followed. In terms of actual operational experience of projects, our experience is mainly geared towards the power sector projects. In the power sector projects, the success is mainly based upon the commitment of they're all power purchase agreements. So the commitment of the amount of availability of power that they're meant to deliver and the success in actually delivering those power projects.
Thank you, Syed. We have another question. We have a couple of questions actually on healthcare PPPs in Bangladesh. You referred to Bangladesh going for a multi-sectoral PPP program. So could you talk a little bit in greater detail about healthcare PPPs, and is there any initiative that's going on? We know that hospitals are required and they don't always function very well, and in my own experience of my country, India, it's been there's a wide divide between how hospitals in the public sector function and private hospitals. So is there any initiative in Bangladesh? And healthcare is a totally different sector, different kinds of PPP. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Okay. So when I actually came here in 2012, there was no focus in terms of health sector being part of, or at least a priority accelerated part of being part of the PPP program. Most of the focus was on actually infrastructure, mostly large infrastructure projects like roads, bridges, ports. That was the main focus. One of the early permissions I sought from my seniors was that I wanted to test out PPP in the health sector. Now, the issue in Bangladesh and maybe other developing countries is, but generally Bangladesh in the health sector is meant to be free, and conceptually a lot of people viewed that if you do PPPs then it will no longer be free, and therefore there will be a commercial charge being made up on it, and therefore this may actually retract from the whole responsibility of government to deliver health services for free. So there was a general, I think, lack of awareness in terms of the different ways PPPs could be done in the health sector without actually having user charging. Like UK has used PFIs, where it's not directly charged to the patients and so on. So as a pilot, I, with the support of IFC, took 2 pilot projects in Bangladesh called in the dialysis sector. And we were using the IFC's experience with Romania and India as well to take this experience forward. And the good news is we've been working over the last 2 years, and we have successfully awarded that contract last month to an Indian provider, health sector provider, on that one. The model we went for that project was a cross-subsidy model, where we were looking to retain a public service delivery element of delivery of health services at a very, very subsidized level. And to subsidize the delivery of these services, we allowed the private sector to also put in place a private clinic or private unit that was charging private sector rates for it, and that was meant to be to subsidize. The result has been tremendous, because in Bangladesh, and I'm not sure if there are any doctors on board, but dialysis cost in Bangladesh is about 4,000 to 6,000 taka. In terms of this bid, we are giving the dialysis for 400 taka, i.e. 10% of the market cost, to a section of people, and the private fee-paying unit is about 2,000 or just over 2,000 taka, still less than 50% the cost of the private clinics in Bangladesh. So, based on this success, the Health Ministry has now become really keen to look at expanding the delivery of PPPs in the health service. Initially, our focus is going to be on equipment-based services. So we're looking at CAT scans, MRI machines, and so on and so forth in terms of our initial wave of PPPs. At this stage, we're not looking at sort of brownfield hospitals being going over to the private sector. We were actually simply focusing on the equipment-based side of the medical services. In addition, we have taken on a few projects in the health sector where other agencies like the Railway Ministry have a number of hospitals, and on those ones we are actually targeting the redevelopment of full-scale PPP user pay model hospitals as well. So that's the two models we're looking at, one with the health sector on the equipment side, and then with the other agencies who are like railway sector looking at those greenfield hospitals.
Do you also, have you also been looking at public-private partnerships in primary healthcare?
Not at this stage, no. I mean, at primary healthcare stage, there has been some discussion with, I think, Asian Development Bank has some programs in terms of those areas, but most of the work we're doing is basically infrastructure-led PPPs at the moment. So we are actually looking at more at sort of equipment-based for tertiary hospitals and so on.
We'll take the next question on the limitations. There's this question from Brinda Devi Singh from the World Bank, and she asks, what are the limitations of the Bangladesh model, and why do you think there are limitations, and how have you identified these as, these specific limitations as important in the program? And there's also, a somewhat related question. Maybe you could take this also together from UNECE. Jan van Schonoven asks, how do you cope with corruption and raise trust for in investors? And do you also see, corruption or the lack of trust as a limitation? So maybe you could handle these together and tell us what you think about this.
Okay. I think in terms of limitations, I could probably spend weeks on it in terms of taking you through the challenges that we have faced and all the issues that are there. I mean, if you go back to the presentation, we talked about the 5 building blocks that we are working on. Effectively, those are the limitations that we are trying to address. And last month at the UNESCAP, I gave a presentation in terms of some of the work that we are doing, and I think I came up with about 40 or 50 odd different things that we are trying to address in terms of trying to get the PPP program off the ground. But if I just shoot some of the main things that really has a lot of difficulty, I think I would start with capacity. The biggest challenge we have here is a lack of understanding about what we are trying to do. People are used to doing things in a certain way. They're used to a goods and services type of procurement mechanism in the country. And this is what they've been doing for the last 20, 30, 40 years. So the PPP requires a very different approach in terms of this development, and the mindset that comes with it actually is the issue that we need to look at addressing and explain to people how these can be done. Because of this lack of capacity, what can happen is people might have a lack of understanding, lack of awareness, lack of interest, genuine worry about what am I letting myself into, And therefore, all of these things actually lead to a lot of deterrent in terms of trying to take a PPP project forward. I mean, our team individually, actually, we go and we spend days and weeks with different people to try and bring them up the learning curve about the PPP and actually trying to make them understand about the project. The whole issue is, does capacity building come first or does the project come first? In our case, we are trying to do light capacity building and then more hands-on training on a project-by-project basis to bring this thing up. But the challenge becomes that people don't stay in one place for long. So I even during my time, have been through 3 health secretaries, 3 or 4 different finance secretaries, a couple of shipping secretaries. So when these people change, they are the heads of the organization. So again, there's a need for the new people coming in to understand and for them to be brought up the ladder and so on. So that's one of the key challenges is the change in personnel and the capacity development there. So that's one area. If I go to the private sector, I'll say there's another big challenge there as well. In Bangladesh, most of the community here are individual self-made business people who've done very well through the private sector and so on. But they are very used to a corporate stroke industrial manufacturing type of environment where they have a quick return on the investment. Infrastructure, as we all know, is actually more of a mature investor environment, mature investment climate, and actually people need to have a more longer term view of profits. So again, there's a need for the private sector here to understand the challenges of infrastructure as a new business asset. And then if I go to the banks, again, the banks are used to short-term financing, what you call trade financing, LC type business. Their deposits are also based upon short-term lending. So again, in infrastructure, when you're looking at long-term risk, there's an asset-liability mismatch. So again, there's a lot of issues there in terms of these things. Non-recourse financing is something that many bankers are sort of just getting into and developing. So again, there's a huge issue there. So there are issues in the public sector, in the private sector, and in the financial sector, and there are hosts of issues that we need to look at in terms of developing. Jon's question about the corruption and issues, it is important. It's something that we need to recognize that basically in PPP we are looking to bring in investors. Investors will not come unless they believe they have a fair chance, a realistic chance of actually winning these tenders. So transparency and openness and fairness is critical to get this PPP program off ground. I mean, one of the things I tell all my honourable ministers is getting a single PPP project done is not an issue. It's quite easy, it can be done. But what we're looking to bring in place is actually a sustainable program of PPP infrastructure being developed, and to do that will take time, and actually it will lead a lot of confidence of investors to come to Bangladesh and put the money in. They will not get the confidence and they will not put the money in unless they actually have appreciation that the whole process will be transparent and fair. So actually from the PPP office, and this is one of the reasons this is part of the Prime Minister's office, is we place a huge focus in terms of how the whole evaluation process is done, including making sure that the evaluation process is not simply limited to the agency people, but it actually has both internal and external people there as well.
Thank you very much, Syed. We have just 5 minutes left, so we are very lucky today. We have our Senior Director, Lawrence Carter, with us, and he's been hearing this webinar. And if you've been looking, Syed, at the chat box, you'd see that he has said that this has been an excellent presentation and he'd like to thank you for it. And he's also asked you whether you might be interested in writing 1 or 2 short entries on the World Bank Group blog platform for PPPs, so that the lessons that you've learned, all these valuable lessons you've shared with us, can be shared with a larger audience. And before we get to the end of this, I'd just like you to refer very, very, briefly to what you have done in terms of communication measures, because PPPs are misunderstood at times or not understood. And Nadine, our communications expert, is also here with us today, and she's asking this question. But you have just 30 seconds or 1 minute to answer, not more than that. Go ahead.
Okay. I think communication is the biggest challenge I faced. On day one, I identified I actually need a communications director in the PPP program to deal with it. Communication, the issue starts from the, I think, misunderstanding in the press. If you Google PPP in Bangladesh, you'll see a huge number of press reports on it. So communications is a big problem, and actually this is one of the areas I'm actually looking for support from World Bank or ADB or anyone in terms of actually looking to develop a program around the whole communication and messaging part. So the way we are addressing at the moment is through individual seminars and briefings and publications that we are gradually starting to bring up. But I think just to put the whole thing in context, we actually have a very, very small office. We have an office of 19 people, of which 5 are civil servants. So it's a very small office. So communication, I agree, is one of the big areas that we are actually missing out on, and we do need to further brush up on that area.
Thank you so much, Syed. So we have a lot more questions, but we'll be happy to answer these on email and later on. And as you've seen, Syed will also go on our blog and talk about this. So you'll have a chance to come back and discuss this at some point of time. And so we come to the end of this webinar. And please don't forget to come back and be with us for our next webinar, which is on March 17th. This will be on a new PPP which has closed in Bhutan. So please come to that webinar. And before leaving, I'd like to remind you that this webinar and the link will be available to all the participants of this webinar today in 24 hours, where you can access the presentation, including the recording. Thank you so much for being with us today.